Hi guys, it's Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft. This is in response to one of my subscribers again reminding me that there was a video I had talked about and I'd never produced, and that was a modification of the Remington to add grease grooves or lubrication grooves to the base pin. So that's what this is. Alright, let us speak a moment about lubrication and why it's very necessary in the Percussion Revolver. Since black powder fouling reacts with modern petroleum-based lubes and produces a hard tar when they burn together, you should use a natural type of lubrication. For example, lard, beeswax, Crisco, things like that. There are many on the market that are natural lubes today which do not react with the burnt powder and produce a hard fouling. When I started out in the 70s, we didn't know that, and so we were using whatever we could find, and guys would come up with these wild combinations of transmission fluid and brake fluid and all kinds of weird wild things, whether or not they worked or not. But the problem we were having with our muzzle-loading rifles in competitions where you wouldn't get more than a dozen or so shots, and then accuracy was ruined because the tar in the barrel from the fouling reacting with the lubrication in the powder was so hard you'd have to just about take a mallet to load the guns. Now when you talked about a percussion revolver, the problem was even more fold. Guns could easily, depending on the conditions, and one or two cylinders just refused to work, where they were so gummed up you could not get the cylinder to turn anymore unless you manually turned it. We know more today, and so lubrication, just like back in the day, is very, very important. So, on a Colt, the Colt already has grease grooves, and it looks just like this. The Remington, however, doesn't have that. The Remington has a small diameter base pin which is smooth, and what Remington was trying to go for was a tight fit to prevent fouling from getting in there. Murphy's Law. And they realized this because the 1861 pattern did not have this. And let me show you what I'm talking about. See this cutout right here that shows the exposed threads? On the original it was just flat across here on the 1861. And that caused such fouling issues that they cut this part of the frame away to expose the barrel threads where it threads into the block, in an effort to try to limit friction between the cylinder and the breech face on it. Now, this base pin, as I have stated, was smooth. I have already modified mine and put some notches in it. We're going to detail that in this video. Now, notice here at the very front, I have left it completely untouched. That first, I would say 3/4 of an inch right there, 1/2 inch or so at least, at the beginning of the base pin. You want to put your base pin all the way in, and you want to mark it about that far back, because that is the front bearing surface of the cylinder. Any modification in front of that is just going to cause fouling to push in there and make it worse. We still want that slick. But from there back, we want to cut a series of grease grooves. Now I've taken a file, and I'd simply bear down and cut a series of grease grooves into the base pin. Then I had flipped it upside down and done the same thing on the bottom edge right here. Of course, the Remington has a flat base on the bottom. Now, what that is going to do for us, notice that it's round on the top, but it's got a flat space on the bottom. That's where it's running inside the groove in the frame here. It's supposed to hold lubricant there, okay? So what you should do is you grease this base pin, especially the bottom of the base pin, fairly heavily. Those notches that I have put in give it a funnel effect, so that as you're firing the gun and the cylinder heats up from the flash of the firing, it causes that lubricant to liquefy just a little bit. So on the next cocking, it brings up. Now, the Remington being too smooth, too much of a knife edge from the bottom to the side, isn't bringing a sufficient amount up, and Remingtons will bind up. By me putting notches in there, it allows more lube to be brought up in through those V's. I'm loading more lube into the rotation of the cylinder. As I point the gun down, that lube will be more likely to come down and therefore keep that solid area that we didn't touch lubricated. Okay? Now, one other word on lubrication and modification. This is very simple. All you're going to do is take a file and you're going to put a series of notches. Don't go overboard. The Colt's base pin is much thicker, so it can afford to have those large, deep cutouts. You want deep notches. When I say deep notch, like I pointed out, and you can see this quite clearly, you know, how deep those notches are. They're just a good deep nick with that file. After you've done that, you may have raised a burr in the filing process. So you want to take steel sandpaper and go over the whole length to make sure there's no sharp edge sticking up to drag on the cylinder. Once you've got it smooth, you've got your notches in it, put the cylinder in and give it a spin. It should spin freely. Okay, if it's looking fine, there's something scratching. Okay, but if you've created the notches, made sure it's smooth, lubricate it generously before you ever start shooting. Okay, I'm going to set this gun up to go to the field. I'm going to pull the cylinder. I'm going to lube this base pin. I'm going to return the cylinder. I am also going to run a wet patch with lube up and down the barrel and wet lube that barrel, so that on my first shot, the ball is entering a lubed barrel, not a dry barrel. We have a kind of a mindset today because of modern firearms that the barrel is supposed to be relatively dry, that we clean it and we lubricate it when we clean the gun after firing and we put it up, but when we pick it up, the bore is relatively clean. That's not the right idea. It needs to be lubed, fairly heavy lubed. You know, it needs to be I don't mean like pack the barrel full, but you know what I mean, lube it. It needs to be slightly wet with lube for that first shot, so that when that first wah of fouling hits, it's already being softened. No hard fouling starts build up. Once the hard fouling begins, you're on a time limit. It will just get harder and harder no matter what you do till you scrub it out of there. So to limit that distortion, what I've done is I will have my base pin very lubed. I've got lubricating marks on it now to add more lube. I've lubed the barrel, and when I get done firing a series of 6 or whatever, I'm going to hook my finger onto the front face like this and turn the cylinder to wipe the front of the cylinder off. You can take a rag or whatever and just wipe the front of the cylinder. Give the cylinder a couple of good spins and then reload it. By doing this, I don't allow it to build up, and so I can shoot all day without the gun getting fouled up. Hope this helps, guys. Any further comments or questions, please put them down below. I'm here to help, guys. If you've got a question, please make a comment. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. I'm Blackie for Shaman's Forge Woodscraft, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.